The stars looked the same as they always did. Cold. Distant. Beautiful. Admiral Tejo Park stood at the observation window of his flagship, the horizon's end, and watched Earth grow smaller with each passing second. Behind him, the bridge crew worked in perfect silence. No one spoke. No one needed to. 300 years ago, humanity had stumbled into the galactic community like a child wandering into a room full of adults. The other species had watched them with curious eyes. Some found humans amusing, others found them annoying. A few found them dangerous, but most simply found them strange. Humans aged too fast. They lived only 100 years while other species lived for thousands. They made decisions quickly, sometimes too quickly. They laughed at things that were not funny. They cried at things that did not matter. They formed attachments to animals, to places, to ideas. They were messy and loud and unpredictable, but they were also brilliant in ways that made no sense. The Galactic Council had spent 10,000 years developing faster than light travel. Humans had figured it out in 200. The Council had debated the ethics of artificial intelligence for 5,000 years. Humans had built one in their garage and taught it to write poetry. Everything about them was fast and strange and slightly terrifying. Tejo remembered the day he received the news about Resolution 4417. He had been eating breakfast with his daughter when the message arrived. The Council had voted to restrict human expansion. No more colonies, no more exploration, strict monitoring of all research. They called it a stabilization measure. They said it was for the good of the galaxy. Tejo had finished his breakfast, kissed his daughter goodbye, and walked straight to the Admiralty building. By noon, he was in a meeting with the other fleet commanders. By evening, they had made their decision. They would leave. Not just a few ships. Not just a small group of rebels. Everyone who wanted to go. Every scientist. Every engineer. Every dreamer who had ever looked at the stars and wondered what lay beyond them. They would take their families, their hopes, their futures, and they would go somewhere the Council could never follow. Dr. Yuna Kang had made it possible. She was a small woman with tired eyes and messy hair. She wore the same sweater every day and forgot to eat lunch. She had been working in a basement laboratory in Daejeon for 15 years, chasing a theory that everyone else said was impossible: extragalactic travel. The ability to leave the Milky Way and travel to another galaxy entirely. The Council's greatest scientists said it could not be done for another 10,000 years. The mathematics were too complex. The energy requirements were too high. The distances were too vast. Yuna had solved it in her basement with a team of 12 students and a budget that would not have paid for a single Council research vessel. Tejo had visited her laboratory 6 months ago. She had shown him the device, a small metal ring that hummed with strange energy. She had explained how it worked, but he had understood maybe one word in 10. What he did understand was the look in her eyes. It was the look of someone who had seen something wonderful and could not wait to share it. "How far can it take us?" he had asked. "Anywhere," she had replied. "Anywhere at all." Now, 6 months later, 10,000 ships moved through the darkness of space. They carried 200 million people. Scientists and soldiers, teachers and farmers, children and grandparents. All of them had chosen to leave everything they knew behind. Commander Do-Hyun Lee walked up to stand beside Tejo at the window. He was a tall man with a calm face and steady hands. He had served under Tejo for 20 years, and they had saved each other's lives more times than either could count. "The fleet is in position," Do-Hyun said. "All ships report ready." Tejo nodded but did not look away from the window. Earth was barely visible now. Just a tiny blue dot against the blackness. His daughter was down there. She had chosen to stay. She loved the ocean, she said. She loved the way the sun felt on her face in the morning. She did not want to leave. He had hugged her for a long time before he left. He had told her he understood. He had told her he was proud of her. He had not told her that his heart was breaking. "Are we really doing this?" Do-Hyun asked quietly. Tejo finally turned away from the window. "We were never meant to stay," he said. "They made that clear." Do-Hyun was silent for a moment. Then he smiled, just a little. "I always wanted to see what was out there." "So did I," Tejo said. "So did all of us." He walked to the center of the bridge and looked at his crew. They were young, most of them, young and scared and excited and brave. They had left behind homes and friends and everything familiar. They had stepped into the unknown because someone had told them there was more to see. "Open a channel to the fleet," Tejo said. The communications officer nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Tejo took a deep breath. In a few moments, he would give the order that would change everything. There would be no going back. No second chances. They would leave the Milky Way behind and travel to a place no human had ever been. "This is Admiral Park," he said, his voice calm and steady. 300 years ago, we came to the stars. We were told we were too young, too reckless, too different. We were told to slow down, to wait, to learn our place. Today, the council voted to put us in a cage. They voted to clip our wings and keep us small. He paused, letting the words sink in, but they were too slow. They have always been too slow. While they debated and voted and argued, we built ships. We gathered our families. We prepared for this moment, and now, we are going to do what humans have always done. We are going to explore. We are going to discover. We are going to find out what lies beyond the horizon. He looked out at the stars one last time. "All ships, engage the Kang drive. Take us to Andromeda." The stars stretched and twisted. Light bent in ways that should have been impossible. And then, in a flash of brilliant white, 10,000 ships vanished from the Milky Way. On Earth, the sun rose over the Pacific Ocean. Birds sang in the trees. Children walked to school. Life went on, just as it always had, and somewhere in the vast darkness between galaxies, humanity flew toward a new home. The council would not learn what had happened for another 12 hours. By then, it would be far too late. The cage they had built so carefully was empty. The bird had already flown, and it was never coming back. High Counselor Vareth of the Torim Collective began every morning the same way. He would wake before sunrise, drink a cup of warm herb water, and sit in his meditation chamber for exactly 1 hour. It was a practice his species had followed for 50,000 years. It brought peace. It brought clarity. It kept the mind sharp and the spirit calm. On this particular morning, his meditation was interrupted by a junior aide who burst through the door without knocking. The aide was young, barely 100 years old, and his 4 eyes were wide with something that looked very much like fear. Vareth opened his own 4 eyes slowly. He did not appreciate interruptions. "This had better be important," he said. The aide's voice trembled. "Counselor, the humans are gone." Vareth blinked. "Gone? What do you mean? Gone? Gone where?" "We do not know, Counselor. Their homeworld remains. Their colonies remain. But their fleet, their leaders, their scientists, they have all vanished. Our sensors tracked them to the galactic rim and then lost them entirely." Vareth stood up slowly. His old joints ached, but he barely noticed. "Show me." The main council chamber was chaos by the time Vareth arrived. Representatives from 200 species filled the vast circular room, all of them talking at once. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing maps and sensor readings and confused reports from across the galaxy. Ambassador Torim Kell of the Veth stood at the center of the room, his long blue arms waving in frustration. The Veth were known for their patience and calm logic, but Kell looked anything but calm right now. "This is impossible," he shouted. "Our projections showed that humans were at least 10,000 years away from developing extragalactic travel. 10,000 years. Science Director Malik Oss, a small creature covered in gray fur, pulled up a holographic display. "Our projections were wrong," he said simply. "The humans did not follow our models. They never have." "Then what did they do?" Kell demanded. Malik touched the display, and an image appeared. It showed a small metal ring, barely larger than a dinner plate. "We have recovered fragments of data from human research networks. It appears a scientist named Yuna Kang developed a new form of propulsion. She called it the Kang drive. It allows travel between galaxies in a matter of months." The room fell silent. Every representative, every diplomat, every scientist stared at the image of the small metal ring. It looked so simple, so ordinary, and yet it represented a leap in technology that should have taken millennia to achieve. Vareth finally spoke. "How long have they been gone?" Approximately 12 hours, Counselor. 12 hours. The vote on Resolution 4417 had passed 14 hours ago. Verath felt something cold settle in his stomach. The humans had known. They had known what the Council was planning, and they had simply left. They cannot have gone far, said Ambassador Reth of the Colon Empire. The Colon were warriors, proud and fierce. They had been one of the loudest voices calling for restrictions on humanity. We should pursue them. Bring them back. Pursue them where? Malik asked. They could be in any galaxy within 50 million light-years by now. We do not have the technology to follow them. We do not even have the technology to detect where they went. Then we build it. Reth slammed his armored fist on the table. We take their research. We reverse engineer their devices. We hunt them down and make them answer for this insult. If Vereth raised a hand, and the room fell quiet. He had led the Council for 300 years. Let me understand this correctly, he said slowly. Yesterday, we voted to restrict human expansion because we feared they were growing too powerful. Today, we discover they have developed technology that makes our entire fleet look like children's toys. And your suggestion, Ambassador Reth, is to chase them across the universe and demand they obey us? Reth's fierce expression faltered. They are gone, Vereth continued. They looked at our cage and decided they did not wish to live in it. So they built a door and walked out, and we, with all our ancient wisdom and vast experience, did not even notice until they were already beyond our reach. The silence in the chamber was heavy. Representatives who had spent centuries looking down on humans now found themselves unable to meet each other's eyes. Ambassador Kell spoke quietly. What do we do now? Vereth walked to the window of the chamber. Outside, the stars burned cold and bright, just as they always had. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the galaxy, humanity was flying toward a new home. They had taken nothing that did not belong to them. They had harmed no one. They had simply refused to be controlled. We do nothing, Vereth said. We watch. We wait. And perhaps, if we are wise, we learn. Learn what? Reth asked. Vereth turned back to face the Council. We have spent 10,000 years building an empire. We have conquered worlds. We have written laws. We have created order. And in 300 years, a species we dismissed as children has surpassed us in every way that matters. He paused, letting the words sink in. Perhaps the lesson is that we were wrong about them. Perhaps the lesson is that we were wrong about ourselves. Perhaps the lesson is that the universe is larger than any empire, and those who try to control it will always be left behind. The Council debated for 3 more days. Some wanted to pursue the humans. Some wanted to forget them. Some wanted to study their abandoned technology and learn their secrets. In the end, they did what councils always do. They formed committees. They wrote reports. They argued about procedures. But late at night, when the chambers were empty and the debates were done, many of the representatives found themselves standing at windows, looking up at the stars. They wondered what the humans were seeing right now. They wondered what new worlds waited in distant galaxies. They wondered what it felt like to be free. And deep in his private quarters, High Counselor Vereth sat alone in the darkness. He thought about a species that lived only 100 years. A species that made decisions too quickly. A species that laughed at things that were not funny and cried at things that did not matter. A species that had done the impossible while the Council was busy voting. He reached for his cup of herb water, but his hands were shaking too much to hold it steady. For the first time in 300 years, the High Counselor of the Galactic Council felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt small. Outside his window, the stars burned on, indifferent to empires and councils and the small concerns of ancient species. Somewhere among them, humanity was already becoming a memory, a story, a legend. The cage was empty. The bird had flown, and the Council was left with nothing but questions they did not know how to answer. The morning sun was warm on Sujincho's back as she knelt in her grandmother's garden. The tomatoes were coming in nicely this year, big and red and perfect. Her grandmother had taught her how to grow them when she was just a little girl. Now her grandmother was gone. But the garden remained, and Sujin tended it with love. She heard the sound before she saw it, a low hum, like 1,000 bees buzzing in harmony. She looked up and watched as a silver ship descended from the sky. It was shaped like a teardrop, smooth and beautiful, and it landed in the empty field behind her house without making a sound. Sujin wiped the dirt from her hands and stood up slowly. She had never seen an alien ship this close before. Most of them stayed in the big cities, talking to politicians and scientists. They did not usually come to small towns in the Korean countryside. A door opened in the side of the ship, and a figure emerged. It was tall and thin, with blue skin and long arms that nearly touched the ground. Its eyes were large and black, like pools of oil. It wore a silver robe that shimmered in the sunlight. The alien walked toward her with careful, measured steps. When it spoke, its voice was strange and musical. "I am Ambassador Torum Kell of the Veth Diplomatic Corps. I wish to speak with your leaders." Sujin looked at the alien, then looked back at her tomatoes. "Most of the leaders left," she said. "You can talk to me, though. I am on the neighborhood council. We decide things like when to fix the roads and where to put the new bus stop." The alien was silent for a long moment. Sujin could not read its expression, but she had the feeling it was confused. "I see," Kell said finally. "Perhaps there is someone else? A government official? A military commander? There is a mayor in the next town," Sujin offered. "But he is probably fishing right now. He fishes on Tuesday mornings." "Fishing," Kell repeated, as if the word was foreign to him. "Yes, with a rod and line. In the river. It is very peaceful." Before Kell could respond, an old man walked around the corner of the house. He was short and thin, with white hair and a kind face. He carried a tray with a teapot and 3 cups. "I saw your ship land," the old man said. "I thought you might like some tea." Kell stared at the old man. "Tea? Yes. It is made from leaves. It is good for you." The old man set the tray on a small table in the garden and began to pour. "My name is Haejin Baek. I am retired now, but I used to be an engineer. Please, sit down." Kell looked at the small chair that Haejin was pointing to. It was made of plastic and had a picture of a cartoon cat on it. The great ambassador of the Veth Diplomatic Corps slowly lowered himself into the chair. It creaked under his weight but did not break. Sujin sat down next to him and took a cup of tea. Haejin sat across from them both, smiling his kind smile. "You want to know how we did it?" Haejin said. It was not a question. Kell nodded slowly. "The technology your species used to leave the galaxy, it should not exist. Our scientists have studied the problem for 10,000 years. We do not understand how your people solved it in a fraction of that time." Haejin sipped his tea. "Yuna Kang. She was my student once. A brilliant girl. Terrible at paperwork, though. Always losing her forms. This Yuna Kang," Kell said carefully. "She developed the extragalactic drive in a basement laboratory with 12 students and not enough money for proper equipment." Haejin chuckled softly. "She used to call me late at night when she got stuck on a problem. I would tell her to get some sleep. She never listened." Kell leaned forward. "Where are her research notes? Her calculations? The plans for her device?" "At the university," Sujin said. "In the public archive. Anyone can look at them." Kell was silent for a long moment. His large black eyes blinked slowly. "You mean, the plans for extragalactic travel are available to anyone who asks?" "Of course," Haejin said. "Why would we hide them?" "Because." Kell struggled to find words. "Because it is the most valuable technology in the universe. Because it would give any species that possessed it an enormous advantage. Because that is what your species would do," Sujin finished for him. Kell closed his mouth. He had no answer for that. Haejin set down his teacup. "Ambassador, I am going to tell you something about humans. We do not think the way you do. We do not live as long as you do. We do not have time for secrets that last 10,000 years. When we discover something wonderful, we want to share it. We want everyone to see what we have seen." "But why?" Kell asked. "Why would you give away your greatest advantage?" Sujin smiled. "Because we were never trying to have an advantage. We were just trying to explore." Kell spent 6 months on Earth. He traveled to every continent. He talked to farmers and teachers and children. He ate strange food and listened to strange music and watched humans do things that made no sense to him. He watched them play games where the goal was to lose. He watched them spend hours painting pictures that they would give away for free. He watched them risk their lives to save animals they had never met. He watched them cry at stories that were not even real. And slowly, he began to understand. Humans did not see the universe as a competition. They did not count their victories or measure their power. They saw the universe as a story, and they wanted to know how it ended. They wanted to turn every page, open every door, and climb every mountain. Not because they would gain something, but because the mountain was there. On his last day on Earth, Kel stood in Sujin's garden and watched the sun set over the mountains. The sky turned orange and pink and purple. Colors so beautiful they almost hurt to look at. "I think I understand now," he said quietly. Sujin stood beside him, her hands still dirty from the garden. "What do you understand? Why you shared your technology? Why you left the galaxy? Why you never tried to fight us or conquer us?" He paused. "You were never afraid of us at all, were you?" "No," Sujin said. "We were not afraid. We were just curious. About everything. About everyone. About what might be waiting out there in the dark." Kel nodded slowly. "My species has lived for 1,000,000 years. We have built empires and fought wars and written laws that will last forever. But in all that time, we never thought to ask what was beyond our own galaxy. We never even wondered." "Maybe you should start wondering," Sujin said. The ambassador looked at her for a long moment. Then, for the first time in his very long life, he smiled. "Maybe we should," he said. He climbed back into his silver ship and flew away into the evening sky. Sujin watched him go, then turned back to her garden. The tomatoes still needed watering. Some things did not change, no matter how far humanity traveled. But as she worked, she looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, her species was flying toward something new. Somewhere out there, they were writing the next chapter of a story that had no end. And here on Earth, in a small garden in the Korean countryside, Sujin Cho smiled and went back to her tomatoes. The universe was very big, but it was not too big for wonder. The signal came from nowhere anyone expected. It traveled 2.5 million light-years across the empty void between galaxies. It passed through clouds of dust and rivers of radiation. It slipped between the stars like a whisper in the dark, and when it finally reached the Milky Way, it changed everything. Every receiver in the galaxy picked it up at the same moment. Military stations and science outposts, trading ships and colony worlds, the council chambers and the smallest farming villages. Everyone heard it. Everyone watched. Captain Minho Jang appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds. He was a tall man with tired eyes and a warm smile. Behind him, the observation window of his ship showed something impossible. The spiral arms of a distant galaxy, seen from the outside. Stars beyond counting. Light beyond imagining. A view that no being in the Milky Way had ever seen before. "This is Captain Minho Jang of the Human Expeditionary Fleet," he said. His voice was calm and steady. "We are broadcasting from the Andromeda Galaxy. Our journey took 4 months. We lost no ships. We lost no lives. We are safe, and we are not alone." He paused to let those words sink in across the vast distances of space. 18 months ago, we left the Milky Way. We did not know what we would find. We did not know if we would find anything at all. The space between galaxies is empty and cold, and we were afraid. But we kept going, because that is what humans do. We keep going. The image shifted, and new faces appeared on the screen. They were not human faces. They were strange and beautiful and utterly alien. Some had scales. Some had feathers. Some had skin the color of sunset. They stood beside the human crew, and they were smiling, or doing whatever their species did when they were happy. "We have established first contact with 3 spacefaring civilizations in Andromeda," Minho continued. "They call themselves the Harmony of Light, the Deep Wanderers, and the Children of the First Star. They have never heard of the Galactic Council. They have never heard of the Torim, the Veth, the Kolin, or any of the species we left behind. They have their own histories, their own stories, their own dreams. A new figure stepped into frame beside Minho. Her name was Unji Lim, and she was the fleet's chief diplomat. She was a small woman with short black hair and eyes that sparkled with intelligence. When we arrived in Andromeda, the first civilization we met asked us a simple question, Unji said. They asked us who we were. We told them we were explorers. They asked us where we came from. We pointed at a small dot in their sky, a tiny spiral galaxy barely visible against the darkness. And we said, there. That spiral over there. That was home. She smiled, and there was something in that smile that made viewers across the Milky Way lean closer to their screens. They did not believe us at first. They thought we were joking. No species, they said, would travel so far just to see what was out there. No species would leave everything behind just to answer a question. But we showed them our ships, and we showed them our history, and slowly, they began to understand. The image shifted again. This time it showed a planet covered in blue and green, orbiting a golden sun. Cities of crystal and light covered its surface. Ships moved through its sky like flocks of birds. This is the homeworld of the deep wanderers, Minho said. They have invited us to stay. They have offered us land and resources and friendship. They say they have never met a species quite like us before. They say we remind them of themselves, long ago, before they grew old and cautious. He turned back to face the camera directly. We are not staying. Not yet. There are more galaxies to explore, more civilizations to meet, more questions to answer. But before we go, we wanted to send this message back home. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small data chip. This chip contains the complete plans for the Kang drive. Every equation, every diagram, every piece of information you need to build your own. We are broadcasting it now, on every frequency we can reach. By the time this message ends, every species in the Milky Way will have access to extragalactic travel. The council chambers erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted and argued and waved their arms. Some demanded that the broadcast be stopped. Others sat in stunned silence. High Counselor Varath watched from his seat, his 4 eyes wide with something that might have been wonder. On the screen, Unji spoke again. We are not doing this to prove a point. We are not doing this to embarrass anyone. We are doing this because we believe the universe is too big for one species, or one council, or one galaxy. We believe everyone deserves the chance to see what is out there. She held up a small device, and a holographic map appeared beside her. It showed the location of Andromeda, the path the fleet had taken, and the coordinates of the civilizations they had contacted. If anyone wants to join us, we have provided coordinates. The journey is long, but it is not dangerous. The species we have met are friendly. They are curious about the Milky Way. They want to meet you. Minho stepped forward one last time. 300 years ago, we stumbled into your galaxy. You called us children. You said we were too young, too reckless, too different. Maybe you were right. But children grow up. They learn, they change, and sometimes they surpass their teachers. He smiled, and it was not a mocking smile. It was warm and genuine and full of hope. We do not hate you. We never did. We just wanted to see what was over the next hill. And now we have seen it, and it is more beautiful than we ever imagined. We hope you will come see it too. The transmission began to fade. This is Captain Minho Jiang signing off. Good luck, Milky Way. We will leave a light on for you. The screens went dark. In the council chambers, silence hung heavy in the air. No one knew what to say. Everything they had believed about humans, about themselves, about the universe, had been turned upside down in the space of a few minutes. High Counselor Varath rose slowly from his seat. His old bones ached, but he barely noticed. He walked to the great window of the chamber and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond sight, beyond reach, humanity was still flying. They were meeting new species, discovering new worlds, asking new questions. They had taken nothing from the Milky Way except their own ships and their own dreams, and they had given back something priceless. They had given back possibility. What do we do now? Someone asked. Varath did not turn around. We have a choice, he said quietly. We can stay here and argue about what this means. We can debate and discuss and form committees. Or, he paused, or we can build ships. We can follow the coordinates they gave us. We can see for ourselves what lies beyond the edge of everything we know. The chamber was silent. I am old, Verath said. I have lived for 300 years. I thought I had seen everything worth seeing. But tonight, I learned that I have seen almost nothing, and I find that I am not afraid. I find that I am excited. He turned to face the council. The humans did not escape from us. They simply went first. The question now is whether we have the courage to follow. No one answered. But in the days and weeks that followed, ships began to move. Scientists dusted off old dreams. Engineers started building new engines, and across the Milky Way, beings of every species looked up at the stars and wondered what was waiting for them in the light of a different galaxy. The message from Andromeda had done more than share technology. It had shared something more powerful. It had shared hope. 10 years passed like water flowing down a mountain. Slow at first, then faster, then impossible to stop. The Galactic Council still met in its great chambers. The representatives still argued about trade routes and border disputes and ancient treaties. But the arguments were quieter now. The passion was gone. Everyone knew the truth, even if they did not say it out loud. The empire they had built for 10,000 years was crumbling, not from war, not from disease, not from any enemy they could fight. It was crumbling because people were leaving. They were building ships, loading their families, and flying toward Andromeda. They were following the path that humans had carved through the emptiness between galaxies. 12 species had already gone. 40 more were building ships. The old rivalries seemed silly now. Why fight over a planet when there were billions of galaxies waiting? Why argue about borders when the borders meant nothing anymore? High Counselor Verath watched it all from his window. He was very old now, older than any Torum had been in 1,000 years. His 4 eyes were dim, and his hands shook when he tried to hold a cup, but his mind was still sharp, and he saw what was happening with perfect clarity. The council had not fallen. It had simply become unnecessary. On Earth, Sujin Cho was a grandmother now. Her granddaughter, Nari, was 17 years old with bright eyes and a quick smile. Nari looked just like Sujin had looked at that age, full of questions and dreams and endless energy. One morning, a letter arrived from Andromeda. It was not a radio signal or a digital message. It was an actual letter, written on actual paper, delivered by a small drone that had crossed 2.5 million light-years just to drop it in their mailbox. Nari brought it inside, her hands trembling with excitement. Grandmother. It is from Dr. Yuna Kang. Sujin set down her tea and took the letter carefully. She had heard stories about Yuna Kang all her life. The brilliant scientist, the woman who had changed everything, the girl who had solved the impossible in a basement in Daejeon. She opened the letter and began to read aloud. Dear friends on Earth. The letter began. I hope this message finds you well. I am writing from a planet called New Hope, in a system near the center of Andromeda. I am 73 years old now, and my hair is white, but I am still working. I do not think I will ever stop. Sujin smiled. She had heard that Yuna was like that. I wanted to tell you about something beautiful we found. There is a nebula here, about 200 light-years from our colony. It is made of gas and dust, like all nebulae, but the colors are unlike anything I have ever seen. Reds and oranges and purples, all swirling together like paint on a canvas. When you look at it from our observation deck, it looks like a flower blooming in slow motion. Nari leaned closer, her eyes wide. I named it the Garden Nebula, after the garden I remember from Earth. Do you remember? Sujin, I visited your grandmother's garden once, when I was young and scared and did not know if my work would ever matter. Your grandmother gave me tomatoes from her garden and told me to keep trying. I never forgot that kindness. Sujin felt tears forming in her eyes. She did not remember the visit, but her grandmother had told her about it many times. A young scientist with messy hair and tired eyes, eating tomatoes in the garden and talking about impossible dreams. We have found so many wonderful things out here, the letter continued. New species, new worlds, new mysteries to solve. But I think the most wonderful thing is this. We are not alone. We never were. The universe is full of life, full of stories, full of beings who look up at the stars and wonder, what is out there? We just had to be brave enough to go and meet them. The letter ended with a simple closing. Tell your grandmother's garden that I remember it. Tell the tomatoes that they saved my life. And tell anyone who will listen that the universe is bigger than we ever imagined, and more beautiful than we ever dreamed. With love, Yuna Kang. Nari sat quietly for a long moment. Then she looked at her grandmother with serious eyes. I want to go there someday, she said. I want to see the Garden Nebula. Sujin reached out and touched her granddaughter's cheek. Then you will, she said. That is what we do. We keep going. Far away, on a planet at the edge of the Milky Way, High Counselor Varath made a decision. He had thought about it for 10 years. He had argued with himself, debated with himself, convinced himself 100 times that he was too old, too tired, too set in his ways. But the letter from Andromeda had changed something. Not a letter to him, of course. Just news of it, passed along through channels and reports. A scientist naming a nebula after a garden, a small act of remembrance across 2.5 million light-years. It was such a human thing to do. Varath called for his aid and gave instructions. His personal ship would be prepared. He would travel to Earth first, to see the garden that had inspired such a name. Then, he would go to Andromeda, to see the nebula for himself. His aide looked shocked. Counselor, the journey is long. At your age, at my age, Varath interrupted. I have spent too much time sitting in chambers and arguing about nothing. I have watched empires rise and fall. I have seen wars begin and end, but I have never seen a nebula that looks like a flower. He stood up slowly, his old bones protesting every movement. The humans taught us something important. They taught us that the universe does not care about our empires or our councils or our ancient traditions. It only cares about those who are brave enough to explore it. I have been a coward for 300 years. It is time to stop. His aide did not argue. There was nothing to argue about. 1 month later, Varath landed in Sujin's garden. He was older than the last time they had met. And so was she. But they recognized each other immediately. You came back, Sujin said. I came to understand. Varath replied. Last time, I failed. I saw your garden and your tea and your simple life, but I did not understand what it meant. I thought you were giving up. I thought you were surrendering. And now I know you were doing the opposite. You were choosing what mattered to you, choosing to be happy. He looked around at the garden, at the tomatoes growing in the warm sun. I have spent my whole life being told what to want, power, influence, control. But no one ever asked me what I actually wanted. What do you want? Sujin asked. Varath was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, and his voice was soft. I want to see the Garden Nebula. I want to stand in front of something beautiful and feel small. I want to understand why your species ran toward the unknown, instead of away from it. He paused. I want to stop being afraid. Sujin smiled and handed him a tomato from her garden. It was red and ripe and perfect. Then go, she said. Go and see everything. Go and feel small. Go and understand. And when you get there, tell Yuna that the tomatoes are still growing. Varath took the tomato carefully. He looked at it for a long moment. This simple fruit from a simple garden on a small planet in a quiet corner of the galaxy. Then he smiled, for only the second time in his very long life. I will, he said. I will tell her. I will. 2 weeks later, his ship lifted off from Earth and turned toward the darkness between galaxies. Behind him, the Milky Way grew smaller and smaller until it was just another spiral among millions. Ahead of him, Andromeda waited. The Garden Nebula waited. A universe full of wonders waited. And for the first time in 300 years, High Counselor Varath of the Torum Collective felt something he had almost forgotten. He felt young. The stars stretched out before him, endless and beautiful and full of possibility. Somewhere out there, humans were still exploring, still asking questions, still running toward the next horizon. He did not know if he would ever catch up to them. But that was not the point. The point was to try. The point was to go. The point was to never stop wondering what lay beyond the next hill, and so he went, carrying a tomato from a garden on Earth, flying toward a nebula named after a memory, finally understanding what the humans had known all along: the universe was not a cage. It was a door, and all you had to do was walk through it.